Larry Hoover is the founder of the Chicago street gang Gangsta Disciples, better known as GD. He is now a former member as he has renounced the gang officially back in July of this year. He is currently serving 6 life sentences at ADX Florence Prison, located in Florence, Colorado. It was determined that he ordered a murder that took place in 1973 and was sentenced to 200 years initially. That changed over the years, and the system continued to pile on more time. Now, as an urban political celebrity in Chicago, he mentioned that GD now stands for growth and development. He has been trying to get his sentence reduced and possibly pardoned so that he can be an example to other young men of what not to do as a citizen and impart wisdom and guidance for them to lead a better life by making better choices than he did. To aid in this effort, the Second Chance TV shows and production company has created a platform for forgotten prisoners to shed light on Mr. Hoover's case and other cases like it. Let's learn more. All right, you are tuned in to EGO's Media Mayhem with me, Lady J. And as you all heard that wonderful intro, we have some amazing special guests today to discuss this ongoing matter. So today's guests include Mr. John Fitzgerald, who is the former special agent with the Department of Justice, who now provides special government security and is the host of Forgotten Prisoners. And joining him is the CEO and founder of Second Chance TV Shows and Production, Inc., Mr. Paul Newtall. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you for joining me. It is an honor and a privilege to have you both here to discuss this. Man, it's political, but it's also a very relevant matter in the climate today in our society. So thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am. Also like to send a shout out before we start. I always got to do this. I got a little thing to shout out to apparel, Hood Imperial Gear. Just say that.
Okay.
People will kind of recognize them. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, no problem. So my first question for you both is, why is there such an urgency now to get Larry Hoover pardoned?
Well, Larry Hoover is a great guy. Okay, so as I went back to look at some things, I don't think John did, but I know he knows what I'm speaking with. Larry Hoover, I'm sorry. He's a renowned, as they say, was in a gang and is not in the gang no more. However, the government system is still trying to say that he is. So they got him in maximum security. We've spoken about this before with Larry Hoover. They don't have a lot of evidence on Larry because he was in the gang. Then they say, okay, you was the leader, so we're going to pin this on you. And I think that's something John can reflect on, far as how this deal is going and how the government do the people like that, maybe to red flag them, or they may be dangerous to society, like they stated. But however, I don't think this man's dangerous to society, or I don't even really think, I know that he's not in the gang no more. Maybe some people out there might be still in the gang, but it's just a lot of danger to society that the government has done to this individual. Like, they didn't have recordings or they didn't have tapes or anything. That's like my company, and we talked about this before, John, as well. Like, if someone was to recognize me as being the founder of Forgotten Prisoners or Second Chance TV Show Saves Lives, somebody do something in that era, they gonna come to the CEO, right? Same thing with Larry. Okay, you the man, you did it. They don't have witnesses. They don't have these murders they pinned on them. They have a video floating around that to save his innocent, but however, they ain't gonna talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. So we got a voice now to talk about this situation.
Okay. So with him appealing and trying to get his sentence reduced now several times, here recently this year in July, he officially renounced the Gangsta Disciples. And for those who are just tuning in and you didn't hear at the beginning, he is co-founder of the Gangsta Disciples in Chicago. Do you think that plays a role in that? Because initially he was sentenced to 200 years for a murder that they say that he ordered in 1973.
Right. But I can speak up on that. Far as with that, he's saying that, who'd you hear it from? Did you hear it from Larry himself, or did the papers write that and said he said that? A lot of times people write stuff and they say, well, he said this, he said that, to kind of make the person credibility not great. But how we know he
Mm-hmm.
said that? See, the thing about it is with the law enforcement and with the government that's going on today, that's real corrupt. They say things and he put things on the news media to make a person look real bad. Like a person wrote some stuff on me on the internet, but am I about that person? No, I ain't. You know, am I for to help people around the world? Absolutely. But far as what people say on the press and what they do, a lot of times the government have a lot to do with that. Just to say, oh, I named him as a disciple, and he said this, you know, in July. However, I know from my heart that Larry didn't say that. I didn't spoke to some people again, Jay Prince, Larry didn't do
Mm-hmm.
all. So they just trying to keep him bagged up, and that's what they want to do since the 1970 somewhere they allegedly say he killed someone. So that is how it worked. You got to understand the press. It makes you. It can make you or break you. You know, and I think right now the press is breaking him. If you didn't hear him say it on a video, if you didn't hear him announce it or recorded him saying that or beating somebody up in prison or something, 9, 10 times, you know, the government got something to do with that. That's just the way it is.
Okay, so now we know that in most states here in the nation, when you are convicted of murder, if you are found guilty of murdering someone or conspiring to murder someone, you know, or being accomplice to a murder,
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, depending upon how heinous that crime is and whatever the laws are within that state, why is it that he should be pardoned?
And why? Because you have a Dallas police officer that went in this man's house and shot him and killed him. That should be three murder. You have a lot of people, far as the people who got on this man's neck that was black. A lot of them are just getting 3, 4 years. That should be life. I mean, just because you wear a badge don't mean you can do this. And for with him, because he ain't wearing a badge or he not a government official or anything like that, 9, 10 times they're gonna give it to him. Why? Because he's a black man in society. He made a lot of money back in the days because that's how he was back in the days. But he's 77 years old now. He don't do that. People get older and get wiser. So why not get these individuals life in prison? Why not get a police officer lady that went in somebody's apartment and he was in his house, his own house, and she shot and killed this man? How come they didn't give her life? Why? She white. You know, they gave her manslaughter, 3, 4 years. You know, if that. Okay, how about a police officer that killed another black individual? Why come they didn't get life 200 years? You know, so everybody case is different. But if they had a case like ours, a black man would have went and shot somebody, he'd got life in prison. So I think, and I know that far as with the justice system, I think that everybody, I mean, should be fair, equal fair. He did 32 years. Okay, that's more than enough time, right? Then they set him up. Okay, now you're getting out for doing this. Oh, they got you for drugs. They saying do the same thing with the Michael Harry O'Harris that we talked about. They red flagged these people. If it weren't for Donald Trump partner, Michael never got out. How come Larry Hoover can't get the same treatment like everybody else? How come he can't get the treatment? I mean, he did 33 years. Okay, well, he did his time. But then they still bring up the same murder case in 1975. That was back in the days when they was really doing this slavery time and locking people up. But this is a new era now. This is 2022, brand new. We about to get people out and shake them, you know, because it's not fair. It's not fair to him. It's not fair to everybody else who did murder. We're not saying he innocent. We're saying he did his time. Let the man out. He's 77 years old. But the reason why they don't let Tupac Shakur daddy out, they let him out in December. Why? Because he got cancer. He about to die anyway. Come on, man. It's like just let him out.
So, like I said, initially the 200 years and a life sentence, and then they added more life sentences, you know, 1993, 1995, and, you know, so on and so forth. So with those life sentences that he has, don't you think that it's going to be challenging to get those reversed or get him pardoned for all of that extra time that was given? Was there proof to show that he was involved in those other murders or, you know, in some shape, form, or fashion?
No, I think that once we put it out there, rather we announce it or whether we talk about it, people gonna look into it. You know, we got this man John Fitzgerald. He gonna tell you about the law. He knows law on the back of his hand. He know how to get to the cracks of that what they done to people. you know, and an innocence program ain't gonna help nobody. They usually help people, but it takes them a long time, 30, 40 years, stuff like that. We the only one got a show like this. So once we start putting people out there, you know, and then especially Larry, because he's a red flag case, everybody gonna look into it, and they're gonna be like, you know what, let's give him this freedom. Let's get him out of maximum security. Let's get him out to general population, and let's see about his case. Because again, 200 years, that's a lot of time. You know, and then if you look at everybody else, I mean, there's a cop in Ohio. She shot and killed a black guy. He put his hands up. She shot and killed him. Her sergeant had to turn the gun on her, take her gun. Manslaughter. Come on, man. That's cold-blooded first-degree murder. You know, and back in the days, again, time changed. Time changed now. It's time to let these people free. Again, we're not saying they're wrong. We're not saying they're innocent. A lot of them are innocent that we have, but far as him, he's not innocent. We don't know if he really killed this person. Somebody said he did, and they say, okay, he did it because he was the leader. And that's all they need to say. Like, I can explain it to you. They said you did it. Hey, you did it. It don't matter what if they want you and somebody just say, oh, he did it, or we want you to say he did it. He done. But what kind of proof do you have? Do you have any evidence? You know?
Okay, so Mr. Fitzgerald, can you enlighten us a little bit about how would this work? Because like I said, he's been denied several times. They won't change the sentence. How would this work now with all these people that you all are partnering with and bringing this this case to the light through the television show? What is the strategy?
Yes, well, first, Lady J, thank you for having us on tonight. We appreciate your effort to bring light to not only Mr. Hoover's case, but other cases that we're looking at right now. I want to share with you a couple of things in an effort to kind of build an idea in the mind of your viewers and listeners in terms of where we're going with the show. As Paul was saying, we are not necessarily defending anybody per se. What we are doing is we're raising questions that deserve scrutiny. And there is a similar dynamic in virtually every one of the cases that we're working right now, whether it's poor representation on the part of the public defender or the defense attorney, a degree of police misconduct with respect to evidence gathering, maybe some prosecutorial misconduct, and even judicial misconduct on the part of the judge, whether it range from the instruction of the jurors or to maybe even denying a lawful writ of habeas corpus. So Mr. Hoover's case, and we can't go into great detail because we are working with his team right now. We're not going to reveal defense strategies. Mr. Hoover's case is representative of a bigger dynamic within federal prosecution. Right now, there is no more powerful person than a federal prosecutor. The President of the United States, the Supreme Court judges, I mean, they're powerful within their pathway, but in terms of how we are impacting our day-to-day lives, there is no one more powerful than a federal prosecutor. Now, the irony is that federal prosecutions have gone off the rails for the last 30, 40 years, and there's virtually no way to hold a federal prosecutor accountable for having knowingly withheld exculpatory information. Exculpatory information, for the benefit of our viewers, is that information which proves someone's innocence, right? They oftentimes will gain the ear of the judge, and although the judge has a sentencing schedule that he or she can go by when it comes to post-conviction, oftentimes the judges listen to the federal prosecutors. And the way that the federal prosecutors unwittingly get people to convict themselves, they'll send out a couple of FBI agents, and the FBI agents will knock on your door. Ma'am, sir, can we speak to you for a few minutes? Well, what we hope to do with the show is to create an avenue of learning for the audience so that not only they're examining the issues that attach to each particular episode, we're going to be teaching them how they can safeguard themselves so they don't find themselves on the receiving end of a state or federal prosecution where they've got to rely on a poorly trained public defender. You know, the Sixth Amendment says that we have a constitutional right to representation, right? But we have a right to quality representation, and the vast majority of public defenders working in the city and state level are not qualified. And I often tell people, hey, listen, if you find yourself convicted initially, don't lose hope. It is not uncommon to get convicted at the state level, because there is a weirdly incestuous relationship between the public defender's office, defense counsel, prosecutors, law enforcement, and the judges. And oftentimes, and I'm not going to hang a cliche on it like all boys club or whatever, but oftentimes that works to the disadvantage of the suspect or the defendant, however way you want to label it. Now, we're also looking at this from the perspective of not only educating the public, but looking at each case individually and raising those substantive questions that need examination, because the way that the federal government or sometimes poorly trained local law enforcement works in the criminal justice system is that their greatest ally is that of secrecy. It's the same way that it works in domestic violence. A domestic violence abuser thrives when no one else knows what's going on. Well, similarly, there's a component within criminal justice system where those people who are either, not every person is corrupt. Many times the person is not corrupted, they're simply poorly trained and they don't know what they don't know. And when they do have the tenacity to raise questions that deserve warranty, oftentimes their voices are muted because of old-fashioned peer pressure. So what our legal team intends to do is to raise these substantive questions individually through each episode in an effort to not only draw the attention of the greater public to that case, and an effort to gain the cooperation of these most powerful law firms or these celebrities. People can now invest time and money to actually look at these cases. And oftentimes, I'm going to be honest with you, peer pressure on the part of the state legislatures, pressure on the part of the governors, heck, maybe even pressure in the White House, will get many of these people resentenced. And when they're resentenced, you will find, unfortunately, that they've actually served more than the statutory maximum, because there are people who are serving indeterminate sentences. So this is a complex dynamic. You never want to get caught up in the machine that is criminal justice, and especially federal prosecution. So the numbers are so overwhelming at the federal level that the vast majority of cases are pled out. Something, and don't quote me on the figure, but it's in the 90s. Something like in excess of 90% of the cases at the federal level, they will plead out. Why? No one has got that kind of money to withstand the prosecution for the next 5-10 years. And so they take a plea. And oftentimes they will plead the things that they didn't do, quite honestly. So I don't know if I actually answered your question with enough specificity with respect to Mr. Hoover. Again, we cannot go into any defense strategy, but Mr. Hoover's case is only representative of the dynamics that apply to him in particular, but representative of the, I guess, the illness that attaches to many federal prosecutions.
Okay, and so you mentioned exculpatory evidence. Is that something that is present in Mr. Hoover's case?
Well, we're not going to be able to speak to that dynamic because we are actively engaged with the legal team. I will say that we're raising questions that go beyond the issue of exculpatory evidence. We're raising questions about whether or not he was subjected to sentencing in a manner that was inappropriate, quite honestly. So that's, I'll give you an example. At the state level, okay, I'm going to talk about California, okay? The state level, you get picked up for a misdemeanor crime and then becomes a wobbler, meaning it could wobble on the side of a misdemeanor or a felony. So in the state of California, a misdemeanor will get you less than a year in jail. A felon will get you a minimum of a year in jail. Now, depending on whether or not the prosecutor decides to work with your public defender, they may encourage you to take a plea rather than going to trial. Now, if you didn't commit the crime, you get your butt in that trial room. You go to trial. But oftentimes the public defenders are poorly trained, and I'm not going to use the word collusion when it comes to working with the prosecutor's office, but the prosecutor will look at a sentencing spectrum in terms of what you could get, knowing really that you only deserve 2 years, but they'll say, yeah, but you could get a maximum of 15 years. Well, when you give a poorly educated person who's poorly represented the sense that, wow, if I go to trial and I lose, I'm going to do 15 years. That kind of social pressure, which is very misleading in its intent, will oftentimes cause a young man or a young woman to take a plea and go to jail for something they didn't do. And so what we hope to do with the show, we're going to be ending every episode with what we call case text, where essentially we're giving the general public about 5 to 10 minutes worth of legal advice per se, but guidance regarding what they can do to better secure their constitutional safeguards in their day-to-day lives. So, for example, poorly trained people say, well, I know my rights, right? Well-trained people say, well, I am operating within my constitutional safeguards, because the term constitutional safeguards comes directly from Supreme Court cases. And so when dealing with members of the criminal justice system, whether it be a judge or a police officer or a prosecutor, if we can train up the citizenry to start engaging and utilizing the language, which would indicate that they do have some degree of training with respect to their day-to-day constitutional safeguards, we believe that that relationship is going to be that relationship will be based on a greater degree of parity. Because right now, people feel as though they answer to law enforcement. No, it's just the opposite. Law enforcement answers to the citizenry. Now, don't get me wrong. I am absolute pro law enforcement, but I am anti-poor training. I am anti-corruption, right? I am anti anything that's going to diminish the rights of our great citizenry of this great United States. And so with that,
Right.
I believe, and let it be a given that there are well-trained cops, or are well-trained prosecutors, well-trained judges. Let that be a given. However, there are enough of those people in the other category to really injure the quality of our lifestyle. Okay, whether it's 1 or 10, the fact that they even exist in a profession that is dedicated to securing our safety, the fact that they could be operating in a manner that injures our personal lives, well, that's got to be addressed.
Yes, absolutely.
So he's been in maximum security apparently for quite some time. Is there any I'll say behavioral pattern since he's been in prison that says or states, hey, this is a model prisoner, like he's been reformed and he can add some value to the outside world, to the citizens, to the young people, who may be following in the footsteps of those who are in gangs or any other type of street activity, or just connecting themselves with the wrong crowd.
Yeah, they got him in max security by himself. Unfortunately, fortunately, I'm sorry. Fortunately, we send a letter out to him. He gets all kind of mail, for people, and the government have to go through it because they got to figure out what's going on and what they're saying. And I said to my wife, I said, I don't think it's going to hit his hands, but if it hit his hands, we got it. And then all of a sudden it hit his hands. Yeah, his attorney called us, called myself, and then all of a sudden I had him after another time. I had him with John for sure. He was on the phone with his attorney. And then from there, his attorney called me and had Jay Prince on the phone. So I knew when I got to Jay, I knew that it was very important because he ain't gonna call nobody or talk to him if they're not important. And I spoke with him on several occasions, and we talked about Larry. Larry, again, he can be a big person. They can use him as, okay, listen, talk to these gang members, talk to these people. A lot of people want to be like Larry Hoover. A lot of people want to sell drugs and all these other things. But with Larry being the role model of the community, role model of people from the disciples and stuff like that, and that nature, he can stop all that and say, listen, y'all shouldn't do this, y'all shouldn't do that. He's 77 or 70 some years old. I mean, what else you want from the man, But yeah, like you stated before, they can utilize him as helping these individuals and speaking to them because they gonna listen to him. They did the same with Mike. Mike spoke to him, and same thing with Larry. Get him out in the general population. People upset because they got him in max. Of course, they doing all these things and fighting. But when you let him out, then he said, listen, let's stop all this madness. Let's all come to. They separated him because they didn't want him to say that. They wanted to keep it going. That and when if it's a nonstop violence, blacks against black crime, they like that. They don't want the leaders to come up and speak up and say, "Hey, you guys need to stop this," because they're gonna listen to him. But when they're in max, they don't see him. They don't let him talk to anybody. So that's the government strategy to say, "Okay, we separated you guys. You guys go ahead and duke it out," or think that we got something going on with him. Larry Hoover wrote to the judge and say, put me in, and I'm not, he said, I'm not with the disciples anymore. I'm not. And they didn't take that, and they turned him down. So, with that being said, they could have done the things like you stated. They could have done that, but They didn't.
Well, Ms. Lady J, if I may add something that Paula touched upon earlier, your question was, to what extent have some of these prisoners demonstrated corrective behavior while incarcerated? You're going to find that in many of the cases that we're reviewing, that is a consistent pattern. These people, and we're going to be focusing on women, in the next season as well, but these gentlemen have in fact done exactly what you suggested. They have not only served as a role model for fellow inmates, they have made an effort to reach the youth of America, either through programs where the kids are brought into the system, so to speak, for a day, or written communication. Sometimes they do video chats. I'm working with a gentleman who'll be appearing on our show as one of the episodes, who started an anti-gang movement about 35 years ago when he was first incarcerated. And so the answer is yes.
Awesome.
They've engaged in behavior where they have a demonstrative value to society. And with respect to, let's say, the Innocence Project, I've never worked with them, and I don't know anyone who's worked with them. What I've seen from open source, they're a well-intentioned, merit-based operation, and I think that they've been instrumental in freeing a number of people. So my hat goes off to them. We actually need more projects like that. We are going to be different in that while the Innocence Project will in a very dedicated manner, focus on an individual exhaustively, we're focusing on those patterns that impact similar individuals on a greater scale, if that makes sense at all. And so we're not hoping to just simply free someone in particular. We're hoping to prevent, a number of people from ever finding themselves in similarly situated circumstances in the future, if we can get them. So one of the things we hope to do is to maybe get out there and start speaking to freshmen in high school, especially in the inner cities. And so we could start, and we're going to be playing the role of a parent, quite honestly. I mean, all parents say, okay, I teach my minority, son, how to talk to law enforcement. I have found that not to be the case, because oftentimes I have found that the parents themselves didn't know how to operate in the freedom afforded to them with respect to their understanding of constitutional safeguards. So in a way, if we can get out there and start speaking to the kids, we're hoping to impact an entire generation. And quite honestly, I would be pushing for more patient in federal law enforcement, because quite honestly, that's why I was drawn in law enforcement. I was drawn in law enforcement years ago, growing up in New York. I grew up in a home characterized by domestic violence, and I got sick and tired of my dad being able to do as he pleased and no response to law enforcement. I remember a teacher said to me back in the 70s and 80s, well, John, if you want to make a change in an environment, then you get involved. That's what I did, quite honestly. And I think that if we can start teaching kids how to engage the criminal justice system, it'll steer them clear of it, quite honestly, because our youth are in peril. I mean, they're listening to music that is promoting an aggressive behavior. They're looking at TV shows where the bad guys are the cops. You know what I mean? And we won't get into the entertainment value, that sort of thing. We're just saying that there are a ton of kids in the inner cities of America who, unfortunately, owing to different circumstances, aren't being raised, by their family, and more so by social culture and social media. And so we're hoping to address this dynamic on a multiplicity of levels.
Right. Awesome. So tell me, and those who are watching right now, how can they get involved to help this cause and to help this particular case that you all have gotten even more involved with?
I think one thing they can help us with is like being a part of the system, being a part of the awareness, what we bring to the table. I think that with every government official, or every mayor, or whatever it may be, if they get involved and see the things that we're doing and highlighting these individuals, highlighting just people in general, I think it'll be better than it is now. Like a lot of politician people, they say these things, they do this, they do that. A lot of people don't care about no money, SBA loans anymore. They talking about getting their family out of prison. If we can get these government officials to sit on the table and say, listen, I'm not going to sit here and let this happen to any minority person. I don't care if they black, white, green, whatever. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to make a difference in this world, and a difference in the corruption, and I think it'll be better if they come on and say, hey, let's join this party. Let's see what's going on. Let's seek out the people who have these bad cases. Let's seek out the people who've been there too long. And I know it's the prison system make a lot of money. I don't know if they put in their pocket or not. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming. But however, I know that if they joined us on the mission that we're going through right now, the world will be a better place. A better place.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can add to that, just about a month or two, I was interviewing the attorney for one of the episodes that we're going to be airing. And I said, Counselor, do me a favor. If you had it to do again, or if you had a magic wand, what would help you, or what would help people who are similarly situated to your client? What would help people at the state level? I said, John, really what we need is the state legislatures to earmark more money for appellate defense.
Yes.
Because what happens is that when someone gets convicted at the trial level, okay, if they happen to have had an attorney or a public defender, okay, it is what it is. But appeals are very expensive, and public defenders don't travel with you when you go through the appellate process. And you can only get a private attorney wherein you'd have the money to pay for their continued representation through the appellate process. Well, if the states created a fund that allowed for defendants accused of certain crimes, mostly it's going to be homicide or something, if they allowed that fund to be utilized by the legal community, it would provide a greater degree of justice for those who need appellate review. And that's just one example of some of the ideas we're getting from people who are on the ground level. I will tell you this, okay? So we're focusing on a case here in California. I'm reaching out to Governor Newsom. We're focusing on a case in Pennsylvania. I just reached out to Governor Wolf's office. So we're going to create a conversation that people have tried to avoid. Because what I'd like to know is how a government official is going to hold himself or his state's criminal justice system accountable for things that need to be changed. So we always throw the term criminal justice reform, but no one really examines what that really means, quite honestly. And oftentimes that's because it's been heavily politicized. We need to walk away from the politics and stick with the practical grassroots issues. Well, where is the need for reform? Well, one need for reform is better training for some of our members of the local law enforcement community. I don't think they're all corrupt. I think they're poorly trained. Right. So that's reformation, isn't it?
I think that
prosecutors accountable.
Yeah, I also think that the training is a huge part of it, but also in addition to that,
accountability.
The code of conduct, yes, and the code of conduct, this code that you have, that, well, when you see something, well, that's your fellow officer, so you don't say anything. Well, no, because one bad apple can spoil the bunch. Right. And so we continue to see that over and over again. But when it comes to law enforcement and people's lives and their livelihood, now we're talking about people literally losing their lives when you don't hold people accountable, and then these families not seeing any justice.
Right. So
let me try to address that for you. I'm sorry, Paul, you go first.
No, I was just saying, we nailed it down where, a House of Representative, I guess is a White House. I don't know, John, is it, get a hold of us. They got a hold of us, actually. They want to make a difference as well. And when we looked them up, I'm like, oh, these people are huge from the White House. So, a House of Representatives, we get their attention, then we knocking on doors and the show ain't even started yet. But go ahead, John.
Yeah. Miss Lady J, if I can give you a brief example of how we can begin demanding and affecting accountability in the part of the law enforcement community, I'm going to use California as an example. So here in California, every officer is trained through the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. The acronym is POST, POST. The curriculum for the police academy is based on case law. Case law comes directly from appellate cases and Supreme Court cases, where the decisions of those cases dictate how an officer is supposed to do his job. Right? So when you're at the academy, you're learning constitutional law about how to do your job. When you graduate from the academy, it means that you've demonstrated proficiency in appreciating constitutional safeguards. When you get hired by your respective agency, whether it be the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department or LAPD or Burbank PD, whatever the case may be, you now are held accountable to your policy manual. And your policy manual is a direct reflection of what you learned at the academy. And the academy is a direct reflection of case law. So when you have a young man or a young lady, just kind of going about their lives in the street, subjected to rude behavior on the part of law enforcement, typically what happens is that young man, that young woman develops a low sense of self-esteem because like, oh man, I'm about to get jacked up. Well, part of holding law enforcement community accountable is educating our young people in the authority they walk in. So we want to teach people, say this, officer, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your service to the County of Los Angeles. But officer, your conduct, your rudeness with me is not only in violation of your policy manual's mission statement and values, it's in violation of the curriculum you studied at California Post, and you are ultimately, through your rudeness, you're violating my constitutional safeguards by disregarding appellate law. So officer, I want to thank you for your service. I am ceasing our contact, and I want you to know that if you continue contact with me, you might find yourself on the receiving end of an adverse personnel action tomorrow. See, the thing is, Lady J, the policy manuals demand politeness. They demand accountability on the part of the law enforcement community. What the law enforcement community is counting on is that the citizenry don't know any of that.
Right.
But it's how you stand up for your constitutional safeguards. And our youth are not exposed to the right role modeling right now. Now, granted, what I shared with you is a result of many years of work and experience. When we work with the youth, we will break it down. We will drill them in a way where they'll be absolutely comfortable sharing this with the law enforcement community. You know why? Because they will have read that policy manual. They will have read the curriculum that officers are trained by, because it's all online. They'll know what the term case law means. Because I've had students say to me, John, that's great. You can say that, but I can't. Yes, you can. You can in time. Whether you memorize it through the use of, note cards or whatever, I want you to stop thinking that you answer to everyone else. You answer to nobody but yourself, your family, and God.
That's right.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And so that's real good, especially knowing the terminology to use and how to go about interacting with law enforcement that may create a hostile, environment or exchange. So I think also, I think, Paul, you mentioned this earlier, media plays a role in this as well. And so does higher ranking law enforcement, because the agenda that media pushes, especially within the African American community, is one, it incites fear with younger people that are fearful of law enforcement and engaging. So now when they're pulled over, they don't want to stop. They don't want to get out. They send people because they're scared they're going to die. And because we've seen it over and over and over and over again, because that is what is put out there. And, even though that's not the encounter every single time, it seems as though that is because that's all that is put out there. And so additionally, the higher ranking law enforcement officials also need to be more, I'll say, swift in reprimanding their officers, or if you're an attorney or a prosecutor and you were found to be doing something that you shouldn't have been doing, or whatever the case may be, it's always cover up. And so while that citizen may have that information, it really only helps them in that moment. If things still escalate and nothing is done to that particular law enforcement individual, then it's like, well, that's like beating a dead horse, because there still is no reprimand, there still is no accountability. Meanwhile, the system says that they are holding people accountable for their actions when they are doing wrong or breaking the law. So I think that it has to be some form of accountability and enforcement among all parties.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Lady J, you touched upon so many relevant things, and I thank you for that. I thank you for your candor, because you're one of the few media leaders who will actually speak to the fact that oftentimes minority kids are given a false premise under which to exist. And all that does is stoke fear. And I can tell you from personal experience that a ton of minority kids, I'm not going to say minority kids, they will do things out of fear that they wouldn't normally have done.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that becomes almost like a default reaction. Know this, nearly every police policy manual in America, it is policy that an officer is demanded that he correct the course of an officer that he sees breaking the law. It's in their policy, right? So the problem is that the policies are well written and they're intentional in terms of protecting everyone. The poorly trained officers know that the public isn't aware of that, and of course there's that social pressure within the community not to enforce their own policy amongst each other. I mean, I experienced it even myself. Something, many years ago, I was on the Department of Justice. I can share with you this. Part of our training, what we hope to do is also start training the law enforcement community. So, for example, I teach a 2-week law class for veterans here, and I teach almost exclusively from the California Post police material. And what we've done, we've taken hostage negotiation techniques, and we're applying it to local law enforcement, because oftentimes local law enforcement are responsible for creating the injurious situations by the way they're speaking to the individual. So it's little subtle things. So instead of demanding a license, ask for it. It's what's known as verbal judo. Judo is a redirection of energies in martial arts. Well, the officers must assume that everyone they come into contact with is paralyzed in fear. Instead of letting that feed the officer's ego, officers should now take that knowledge and do whatever they can to alleviate that person's fear. So when you ask for a license as opposed to demanding it, when you introduce yourself, let them know what agency you're with, let them know why you stopped them, let them know that it's your intent to get them on the way as quickly as possible. That'll do so much to alleviate the anxiety on the part of the driver.
Right.
Quite honestly.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
believe it or not, although this is common sense to you and me, this is not common sense because they're not taught. If you look at the curriculum for the state of California, there are 44 or 45 learning domains for California Post. There's not a single domain on effective communication. Not one.
Yeah, now that's a problem. That's definitely a problem, especially when you're engaging with certain groups of people. So, I mean, I think that what you all are doing is amazing. It is needed. And as a mother of, Black children myself, I have 2 Black sons and 2 Black daughters, of course. And it is a conversation that is constantly had in my household. And luckily, I don't have children that, live in overpopulated areas, that are full of poverty and drug and gang activity. But I grew up in that myself. So, and they've been exposed to that. But the way that our children are being exposed to it these days, as we stated here, is through television, media, social media, and things of that sort. So it's just an oversaturation of it. And so they don't get to see. So I'll say a lot of children don't get to see what the reality is or what life is like. This is not, going on. This is when you step outside your door. This is not like the only thing that you see, And it's not happening as often as, while it is happening too often. Let me just put that out there. Disclaimer. It is happening too often because it should not be happening at all. But it's not something that happens as often as the media would like you to see, and it's not every single encounter, So yes, I do appreciate that and what you're doing, and the way that you're going about it is very unique, because not a lot of people would take time out to educate, on that level, whether it be a adult or a child, or a young person. So I commend you all with that. Now, as we gear towards wrapping this up, because man, I could talk about this like all day, because this is some good information, and I think that it is needed. I have friends that are incarcerated, and some where, they are just hounding them, where they've been let out and they, haven't done anything, and just constant, there's constant harassment on the law enforcement or government side with certain people, with those bad apples, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So with this television show, or with this network, Forgotten Prisoners, which is a show on the Second Chance TV production, right, company. Can you tell everyone, how can they support the show? What more can they do to bring light to the platform? And if someone wanted to submit a story or a case to you all, how would they go about doing that?
So how we do it is, if they want to submit a case, they go to Second Chance TV, secondchancesaveslives.org, our website. They hit the icon, go to Forgotten Prisoners, and submit the story. However, now it's a lot of people submitted stories where, they're guilty, and we don't just put a lot of stuff on. We have to really, that's what John and them do. They go through these investigation and stuff like that in that nation. They just need the name, and they need the SID number, whatever it may be, and they can find it out. Also, the platform that we're gonna be on numerous platforms. It's not just it's streaming. It's another network, another, like I said, a lot of people looking for content right now. So we even put it on EGO TV. One of the episodes, but yeah, I mean,
yes, it will be on there soon. Yes, it will.
So we just put it on all the platforms, because we want trying to get awareness in this, and the people who want, again, people to citizens who want to join us, they can reach out to us, and we can see how can they join us, or what can they bring to the table to join us on this mission. But however, we like to keep it where, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like what we have right now is a power team. We have a big team that can utilize everything and kind of move forward with all these episodes that we have. We can, if they government officials, okay, let's go, because they know what the system's about, and they know how to dig and find a needle in a haystack, because they prosecuted people. They know what it's about. So if they've been there maybe 5 or 6 years, I'm an ex-prosecutor attorney, I want to help. Come on, because we can get the riffraff out. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, every state can have its own unit, so to speak. Every major city can have its own unit. One of the things that we hope to do by going out and speaking to the community is to create a dynamic relationship with local politicians, where they can stop talking about politics and actually just do something.
Right.
And even if they just create a fund for the preservation of defense for local defendants, that's doing a lot right there, quite honestly.
Right.
Because it really comes down, it comes down to money. The poor, the disenfranchised, they're just never. I remember this. Okay, I'm going to date myself a little bit. I was in a criminal psychology class back in the 80s, and my professor was one of the most preeminent forensic psychologists in the world, working 3 world-class cases at the time. I'm not going to give up his name or anything. And you remember telling us, the class, back in 1980, whatever, he said, John, if one has about $1 million back in the 80s, one could probably commit a homicide and get away with it. And he's like, what? And we said, why? We asked why. He said, well, because what $1 million will do will buy you the type of legal defense wherein the defense team has worked in it so long, they know all the judges. And because they know all the judges, they know the judge's individual his mindset for what kind of prisoner tends to prevail or vanquish in his court. It also gets you the kind of psychologist will come in and help you pick the jurors, the mindset of the juror. So a very graphic example, in the 80s, if you had a young Black defendant, which you did not want on that juror pool, was a Black business owner who survived civil rights. Because a Black who survived the terror of civil rights is going to hold it against this young Black defendant. He'll say, listen, we worked our asses off to get education and to get jobs and build businesses, and you are running wild in the streets. The professor said what you wanted for a young Black defendant at that time in the 80s was an older white Jewish liberal, a female, because in her mind at that time, all Black kids were doomed to a certain lifestyle. You know what I mean? It was kind of racist if you think about it, but that's the mindset of what goes into picking jurors, right? But that takes money. So if it cost $1 million 40 something years ago, imagine what it costs now for someone who comes from the inner city, who was raised in poverty and has to rely on the defense of a public defender. Oh, forget about it. It's almost as if they're just delaying the inevitable.
Right.
And so if we can acquire more monies for local defense, I think that's going to make a big impact.
Right.
But that's going to be on a state, city, town by town basis.
Yeah, and the 5 individuals we have on set, besides what John added, they are defense attorneys anyway. But they, you know, we have big people, and we talked about this before, Lady J, about who we have. Them are your attorneys anyway. All you got to do is submit, and that's attorneys right there. So our show is one of the, like I said, this is the only show that have this show. I mean, we have 48 Hours Investigation. We have all these other TV shows, but we don't have where it's the federal going against the state, and then the state and the federal together going against the corruption and getting people out of prison, knowing that they was innocent or been there too long or would serve their time. So that's what we have. That circle right there are your attorneys. And then we spotlight. And once you spotlight around TV around the world, people are going to shake. But they'll start letting people out. But we don't know. You don't know if your next episode going to be about you. You know, and so that's the trade. They can say, okay, we're going to put our money in Forgotten Premier because these are attorneys anyway. Because that's what it is. They are ex-prosecuted attorneys, U.S. prosecuted attorneys, former federal agents, people that's big, that's on the senator. They take your case. We not having the public defenders. We not have. We got people, and so and they're gonna highlight your case, and they're gonna get you out of there, and that's as simple as that. You know, so we better.
And you could probably tell in your brief time with us that we don't hold back. If there's something that has to be said, it will be articulated. So we know that we're going to, I don't know, embarrass some people. I know that we're going to challenge some of the status quo. I know that we're going to affect a tremendous amount of change, and we're looking forward to it, quite honestly.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it because it's something that it is something that is needed. I mean, I'm more on the side of, you know, outside of media, mentoring and transformational life coaching is what I do, teaching people how to bounce back, because a lot of that trauma with our youth that I endured, whether it is, you know, you have kids that grow up with parents who are addicted to drugs or alcohol or are incarcerated, or they've been sexually abused. I've endured all of that. And so a lot of those kids, because they don't have the help or someone advocating for them and getting them the help needed in order to change that mindset, they get sucked into a certain type of lifestyle and are exposed to different elements in the environment. And essentially, then they are on a trajectory to, you know, getting into trouble. And so when you don't have prosecutors and defense attorneys that take all of that into account, because I can't tell you how many times I have been in a courtroom with young people and their families assigned to their probation case, and I sit and I listen to the judge commute them right over to adult court. The prosecutor always, you know, is hemming on how much they've got in trouble and all these things, but you didn't consider that this child has been exposed to these elements for 13 years and you expect them to meet a milestone in 6 weeks. Come on now, that is not realistic. It's not realistic. And so it starts at a very young age, even in the juvenile courts. I've seen it, I continue to see it, and it angers me.
It's true.
I was a youth specialist, and I was also region director for a juvenile home. And these kids would come to us, and they would have to be in the program for a while, about a year and a half, or maybe a year. All depends what the case or what happened to them. However, a lot of these kids have been traumatized. You know, a lot of these kids, they see their mama smoking weed, and then she drunk and all this stuff. They go out by themselves. We had a lot of Detroit kids. We had a lot of Saginaw kids. We had all the bad actors. However, we was able to take other kids back, get their felonies dropped in court. And the first thing they want to know is, what's going on with this kid. You know, kid been through a lot. You know, he get restraint and everything. As soon as he come, he don't know what's going on. He don't know who to trust. You know, the staff. You know, and everything. So I've been through a lot with all these kids, and seeing the juvenile system and bringing them to the judge to speak on their behalf to get them released from the program. And so, you know, I'm very and like I said, everybody grew up in a child position. I mean, I didn't go through the bad, but my brothers and them did. But you know, sometimes you get people who doing good, and some people just go left, you know, because they don't know what else to do in life, you know. And that's what the people come out for us for the juvenile home, and they had a lot of trauma. You know, one guy's mom and dad, because his mom beat up his dad, and he was a drug dealer and all this stuff, and it just so much. But they don't look at that because they don't come up like we had came up. You know, they don't have trauma like they had. They might have been good for as most of these attorneys and judges. They come from good families. You know, a lot of them don't go. A lot of them are raised with a dad and a mom. A lot of these kids are not raised either with their mom raised them. It's not too many dads raised them, but the mom raised them, and they looking for their dad, and they do bad things. Their mama is having so many kids. So it's all about how we treat these individuals or what we can do for them. Not keep banging in jail, put them in jail, just forget about it, because that's what that's what they think you're going to do. So that's why they act out, or that's why they do these things, either to get attention or say I'm somebody. But you're not somebody if you shooting people and selling drugs. But however, this is something that they want to do to show, you know, people that I'm somebody. You see, this is what I can do. People respect me now because I'm a drug dealer. People respect me now because I shot this guy, and they saying, "Oh man, you did good," and they respect you. However, it's more to that. You know, you can do better just by getting a job and doing your thing. But when they had that mindset of what their family did and how they was disowned and all these things, it take them to destruction. You know, people don't understand that. Don't understand that. Like, you know.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Do we have time for me to leave you with one last thing regarding the mindset of the youth? If you have a typical group of 50 juvenile offenders, okay? 50, we'll use that magic number. I'm just picking that number, you know, randomly. Of the 50, you have two groups of people. You have the unreachable and the teachable. The unreachable and the teachable. 10 of those 50, they're unreachable because of what Paul just said. They actually enjoy acting out in the anger, right? The other 40 are teachable. They are still acting out in anger, but there's something inside of them that makes them question why they're doing it. And part of why they're doing it is they think they've gone so far down their road that they can't reverse course. Something's not true. And so part of dealing with the mindset of people, but youth in particular, you know, in the business world, an undervalued asset is that property that looks like an empty playground, but could become the site for the next, you know, skyrise. Well, people need to start looking at the worst episodes in their life, the thing that was designed to kill them, as undervalued assets. Okay, so I'm going to be a success because I was born in the streets. I'm going to be a success because my dad was this, or my mom was that. And we've not taught our youth to view the most humbling circumstances as undervalued assets. What these things become are simply anchors that weigh them down. They think they can never outrun their past. Anybody can outrun their past. Anyone who's done it can tell you that, quite honestly. What, you think every Black student at Harvard Law School came from a wealthy family? No, right? The Blacks at Harvard came from diverse backgrounds. Many of them were when they recognized that education was the pathway out. That's why I dislike public school teachers and public school education so much, because there was a time where through art and music and sports, or having shop class or metal class, you could leave high school and start a business. And what happened? Public school did away with art and music and sports, the traditional pathways for kids out of the hood to college. You know what I mean? They did away with metal shop. They did away home economics. I could balance a checkbook when I was in the 7th grade. I could cook a meal in the 7th grade. Public school is
all the
done
life
away
skills,
with it.
all the life skills are gone. Yep. So, and they leave it
Yeah.
up to parents should be teaching their children. I know I teach mine that, but you know, and mentors and things of that sort. So yes, absolutely. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. So before I have you all tell everyone how they can connect with you and follow you on social media and things of that sort, can you share where can people watch the show? And I think one question that someone is probably going to have is, what are the qualifications to be accepted as one of the cases?
For as a case, again, I jump into that. It need to be where, you know, they know that they have got done wrong, or they know they've been serving too much time. Now, a lot of people would know because they innocent. You know, we got a case where a guy was innocent. His brother committed the murder, and he was at the hospital texting and stuff. And he says he had his brother's shirt. Well, his brother had his shirt on. They got his DNA. He said, "Oh, we're gonna try both of y'all," and put him in there for murder. But his brother said, "I did it. He went there." Stuff like that. You know, and it's just crazy because he was at the hospital texting. You don't see that, but they didn't bring that up in trial. You see, stuff like that. Now, I've been there too long where, hey, man, I've been here for 40 years. You know, I overserved my time. The president wrote a legislation on this and that, and we still ain't getting out. You know, stuff like that. Or cases like that. You know, so we do one case like that. However, as far as getting on which outline it's going to be on, or we don't know yet. We do know, but we kind of keep it quiet at the same time because of the investigation and because of the high classified profiles. We don't want someone to say, hey, let's call this network, you know, because that's a lot of government officials and stuff do that. They do it because they don't want you to be out there. You see, they'll call a news article and say, hey, don't write this. I give you $1,500. You know, it's just how it is. So we going to keep it under their hat, you know, but we got a lot of outlets and we got a lot of people who want to help us back us up with that outlet. Well, I spoke to a lot of individuals, but we just got it right now since it's a high classified case.
Yeah, you got to be you got to be strategic. I understand. So let me just put this out here. EGO Entertainment will definitely be airing this, and we will definitely put it on our news forum, just so you know. And I will probably mention it on a couple of red carpets. Okay.
Lady J, I can tell you this: in terms of family members or attorneys who are listening to us now or looking at us now, one of the things that we'd be looking for from the investigative end is that I'm going to need as much discovery material as possible. So if you're the attorney, I need to have all the police reports. I need to have the witness statements. I want the names of the lead detectives, because I'm reaching out to everybody. I'll call a detective and ask him why he found this over that, so to speak. So I need all the discovery material. If the case has gone to appeal, I need all the appellate material. I need the transcripts. Like we're not going to retry these cases, but let's say, for example, when I read a police report, I can tell within seconds if that report was written from the perspective of merit, because I teach police report writing. If it was written from the place of merit, or if it was written in a way that is meant to cover up a violation of police procedure. So I can tell when it's been imbued with subjective material as opposed to objective material. So that's just from a police report. Yeah. So we're going to want to get our hands on as much material as possible, because that's how we end up getting these people freed. When we can start identifying where there was, let's say, police misconduct, procedural errors, then we have a voice to articulate on their behalf.
Awesome. So you all heard that, the qualifications to be considered, you know, to have your case considered by this show and this platform. Also, where can people follow you, connect with you, and things of that sort?
Okay, so if they want to connect with us as Instagram, they go to Second Chance Saves Lives. It's the number 2, N as in Nancy, D as in dog, _ chance _ saves _ lives. And that's on the IG page. For as Twitter is Second Chance Save, the number 2 ND. But I mean, once you go to the Instagram, or you go to our website at secondchancesaveslives.org, number 2, N as in Nancy, D as in dog, chance, CHANCE, saves, SAVES, lives, LIDES.org. It has all our social media on there. They can just click it and follow us on there. So yeah.
Yeah. As far as
Okay.
myself and the investigative team, we are keeping ourselves segregated away from the general public. So if anyone wanted to reach me regarding an investigative question or consulting, whatever, they'd only be able to reach me through the website. And then what Paul would do is he'd forward the information to me. I have my team run a quick background so we know who we're dealing with, and then we'll reach back to them. But myself and the investigative team, as I said, we're going to be segregated away from everyone because we need that insulation with which to do what we hope will be incredibly impactful.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both for being here and sitting and talking with me. This has been an awesome conversation, very enlightening, very informative and educational. And I'm hoping that our viewers was able to pick up a lot of, because you dropped a lot of tidbits, a lot of gems, to kind of help them, especially with their interaction, with law enforcement, at least to get the conversation started. So I do appreciate that. And last but not least, if someone wanted to inquire about the services that you all are going to start with the schools and the youth programs, how would school officials or other organizations get in contact with you about having you come and provide those services to those students?
Well, they just go to our website again, and it says hit the tab on the left hand side, and it says how can we help. Then they just put all the information there, and it sends out, and we'll get it. We'll get all the information for what they sent.
Okay. If you don't have any last words, anybody?
No, we just thank you.
No? Thank
you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to share what we're doing with your audience.
Look at a couple episodes and put it on EGO TV.
Okay, no problem.
TV, so they try to stop you, tell them give you $6 million, and they're still.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put some of that some of those funds into the program to help that, and I'll give you a referral fee too. So thank you again so much for being here. Again, you have been tuned in to EGO's Media Mayhem, and I am your host, Lady J. Until next time,